Okay, hello, my name is David. I'm a digital marketing specialist over at DMS.BLUE. How do I find a startup mentor to build a deep relationship with? I have built surface level relationships online, but want more personal advice and support from a mentor. Great question. Um, I can honestly tell you that's a difficult question, as I'm sure you're experiencing. Now, I saw some of the other answers are basically giving you good advice. It may not be the advice you want. It's difficult. So you're basically saying, how do you build a one-on-one business relationship with people who are either A, very, very busy, B, may not be where you are demographically, um, just may not be very receptive. You just don't know. And really, the way that you do that is by reaching out to people whom you admire and respect, in terms of what they're doing. Reach out to them online and basically say, you know, hey, I really admire what you're doing professionally. I really like your voice and a lot of what you're doing. Could I please establish some communication with you or just ask you some questions? Um, I've had that happen to me on quite a number of occasions. The problem that I ran into personally really was that the questions were either very, very superficial. In other words, you could just Google the question and get a million answers, or just read some books on business, how to scale for growth, how to deal with certain specific issues. All of the information is really available online. The problem is that you have to be able and willing to read 10 answers to the same question in order to get a consensus, because what one person says is not going to be the same thing someone else will say. And the reason for that is that one person won't have the experience that another potential mentor could have. Um, I was a business mentor for a government agency for about 10 years off and on. I'd take a break from it maybe every 6 to 8 months just because it was so overwhelming that in terms of the volume that you would get. And I found that some of the other mentors would give advice that contradicted mine, or that they simply wouldn't have the same level of experience. My experience is really out there in the field, working at agencies, dealing with projects, working with clients. And then other people would give advice on digital marketing who had basically worked at one company their entire lives and had never really been out in the workforce, working with small business clients. They'd just been working with IBM or something for like 30 or 40 years, which is great, but you're not going to have the same experience working with small business owners and agencies and e-commerce startups and so on. So you really have to contact people who you admire and look up to, and just, ask really probing questions that are deep and meaningful for you that you can't get from going to Google or Quora and getting a handful of questions and then reading through them. You really have to do your more research and ask deeper, more meaningful questions, but also be receptive, because honestly, I've had so many people contact me through these mentoring sites and agencies online that eventually I just got burned out from it, where I would give them advice and they just simply wouldn't be receptive to it, or you would give them advice and then you never hear from them again. And you get the impression, well, obviously you either don't like the advice, don't understand the advice, or won't do it. You won't act on it. Um, and as a mentor, that makes you feel that your input is not being received, or that you're submitting it to a source that just, we don't get what you're saying, we don't agree with it, we're not going to do it. Um, I've had very large agencies contact me with serious problems, wanting advice on how to solve their problems. And I told them, this is what you need to do. And I could physically come in there and sit down with your team leads and we can make lists. We can, get together in the conference room and really work this out through the nuts and bolts. And I can guarantee you that if you do this, the results that you want will manifest. The problems sure as hell will go away, but I can't make you do it. And sure enough, they didn't do it. The problem is still there. They're still suffering. They're still poised to go bankrupt. They're just prolonging the inevitable at this point, but they're not growing. So you want to ask probing questions that really address key issues. Be receptive. Try doing what they really advise. And if you can't, ask them, how do I implement this? You want to try to get more depth from the conversations and meet people locally. Offer to take them out for lunch in exchange for asking really probing questions. And if you seem receptive and are asking deep, meaningful questions, and you're receptive, you establish communication, you show them that you appreciate what they're doing and you're trying to implement their suggestions, they're going to be more receptive to maintaining a dialogue with you. There's no, a free lunch, hey, that's great, but let's get real. I could go buy my own lunch. It's not about that. It's about really asking deep, probing questions that show that you've done some research, you're willing to listen, you've taken the initiative, you've tried things, and you want to bridge that gap. I don't want to talk to someone who's not willing to go and read 5 to 10 books, or isn't willing to go and spend time looking up questions. So that's my advice, is to do that more, and then contact people in your local demographic area and ask them, here's my situation, summarize it very succinctly. Would you be receptive to, maybe having lunch with me? And in return, to help me answer some really deep, probing questions, and be receptive. Because the mentor is going to be able to look at that and go, look, if this person isn't willing to go read some books, isn't willing to do research, why do I want to do this? And my way of trying to help at this point is to go online and try to do video responses, because people want video. It's more interactive than reading. But that's what I do. I offer to volunteer through different agencies and organizations online. In most cases, it's the same as when I volunteered for the government agency. The people don't receive what you're telling them. You never hear back from them. They don't implement what you tell them. They won't read. They just won't do it because it's too much work, or they don't understand it, or they're overwhelmed. They don't have time. So they have enough time to ask for the question, but not enough time to do the work. It gets really frustrating after a while. So, and then you realize, look, I could just spend this time growing my own consulting business or charging for these services. And maybe in those cases, the people would be more receptive if they're paying to, a steep sum. Maybe then they'll do what you advise. So for the mentor, it can be very frustrating. And so personally, my way of doing these of giving back is trying to do these videos, being as honest and as sincere as I can, and trying to connect with that one person out of every million who may be receptive, may be willing to do the work. But anyway, that's my input. So I hope that's helpful. And more importantly, I hope that you actually can do it, that you can follow up on it. Everybody's busy today. We live in a society where everybody is working 3 jobs in order to make what we were earning from one. And you have to be willing to set aside time looking at other people's opinions on Facebook and looking at bright, shiny objects, and really budget those 2 to 3 hours per day to study. So that means reading books on how to do what you want to do, not people's opinions, not bright, shiny objects, but how to solve these larger problems and build rapport. That's what makes the difference. So spend 2 or 3 hours a day reading real books on how to solve these problems and building rapport with real people who have verifiable references and testimonials and who've done what you want to do. So I hope that's helpful. Feel free to keep in touch. For digital marketing advice, visit me at DMS.BLUE. It's a real website with a real domain name. And I'm a real person. I do care, but I've only got so much time in the day, just like everybody else. So let me know how things are going and if my advice makes sense. And have a great day. Adios for now.